I have a strange fascination with the slightly peculiar realm of odd-sized drums. Typical modern drum sets are generally sold in standard sizes because those standards have been the most popular choice for drummers for a myriad of reasons. Non-standard drums certainly draw interest, but they tend to appeal to an even deeper layer of the already esoteric world of drum collection. This is one of those odd drums, but it certainly isn't high class by any means. It's a Ludwig Pocket Kit 12-inch snare. Ludwig doesn't even give away exactly what kind of wood it is, just saying the generic hardwood in all of their marketing. Or maybe it's some kind of new material that's wood-like, but they don't want to give away the trade secret. I can't believe it's not wood. Probably didn't do well in test groups. Anyway, I'm unboxing this diameter-challenged cheap snare because I won it in a Goodwill auction. In fact, I was the only bidder on it, and I snagged it for $30. Well, let's see how it sounds out of the box, huh? Yeah, that's not great at all. I mean, I certainly didn't have high hopes for the sound. Could maybe just use a good tuning and it would probably be ready to go, but I remembered seeing that there was a little bit of rust on one of the tension rods, so I wanted to crack the guy open and inspect further. So I channeled the lost art of using 2 drum keys at once. I quickly got to work on removing the batter side head and hoop and to get a quick first look at its naked interior. There isn't a whole lot of clearance between the hoop and the lugs to get a good side grip on the tension rods, something Ludwig decided for whatever design reason, but here's me showing that the first tension rod to come off looks to be in, well, fantastic, almost brand new condition. Certainly a good sign of things to come and not a reason for a 23-minute long video. And here's just a little bit of rust. Alarms aren't going off just yet. A wire wheel or some steel wool will take care of that. Not a problem. The powder-coated batter hoop looks pretty good. Just gonna hit it with the almighty towel of deschmutzing. A little on the light side. They're certainly 1.6mm hoops. An easy decision for Ludwig to keep costs down, just like this head, which is actually surprisingly nice for a stock head. And here's the problem seen in all its glory. Every bit of metal inside is rusted or oxidized to hell. Those are not cracks in the shell near the butt plate. That's the beginning phase of a major problem with rusty hardware on wood. The shell itself looks great. The inside is lightly sanded and it looks like they used a pretty good quality of the mysterious hardwood for the inner ply. But yeah, that rust is going to take a lot of work to remove, or just get new screws. To save this drum, all that rust has got to go one way or another. And super tight tension rods for the strainer hardware. That tells me these snares on this drum have probably never been removed. And there's a little bit of rust on the tension rods on the butt plate. Kind of hard to see, but that issue pales in comparison to the rest of the work that I've just kind of discovered that I'll have to be doing, and you'll see in a bit that it turned out to not really be an issue at all for the butt plate. And the snare wires, they look fine, just generic wires that I'll keep using on the drum, and the rest of the butt plate gets disassembled. At this point, I was already thinking about how much effort I'm going to be putting into this cheap snare. It had just turned into evening after a long Thursday at my day job, and I had to work the next day, so it'd be great to make this a quick one-evening project. Took a quick look at and wipe down of the snare side hoop, which looks true and it's sturdy enough for continued use, so to the side it goes. just gonna throw it out there that I'm not really a snare side head snob. More often than not, I will use the stock head for as long as it will let me. This head wasn't great, but I didn't feel like going out of my way to order something else for this drum unless I absolutely had to. I didn't like it at first, but it'll do the job. The inside of the drum is nice and smooth. I mean, the cheap shell is actually pretty well made. The bearing edges were okay. They felt a little too rough for my taste. Quick hit with some higher grit sandpaper and they should be in much better shape. Now it's time for the de-luggening. I tend not to use a drill for this part. Some people like to, but I just like having more control of my torque when dealing with the lug screws. Just a little bit of hardware inspection. During this inspection, I noticed that for these pocket kits, Ludwig uses the same snare strainer hardware manufacturer as Groove Percussion. I know this because I recently customized and overhauled a Groove Percussion drum kit, albeit with mixed results. God, those Groove Percussion kits are god-awful. Not worth the effort to try and improve. Not recommended. But the good news as I continued to strip the drum of its jewelry is that I had a handful of leftover parts that I could swap out for the rusted ones from the pocket snare. This meant less time for the hardware store trip I now plan to make. Well, now let's take a look at the damage to the shell from the rusty hardware. Every single lug screw was over-tightened a little, leaving indents on the inner ply. The iron oxide was baked and stained into the porous, soft hardwood. Even a washer was stuck in the wood right at the butt plate mounting hole. I've got everything here that I need already. Past me said, stupidly. Not true. I need to hit the hardware store and get some of these. Past me correctly stated. So one long trip to the hardware store later, and holy shit. $30 for screws and washers? Yeah, that's $30 dues. And what does $30 in screws and washers look like? Yeah. Needless to say, if I'm going to continue this hobby of refurbishing, customizing, and potentially building drums, I'm going to be ordering these things in bulk online in the future. Well, I've been stalling for long enough, so I guess it's time for the big crappy part.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
You know, I was gonna talk about what it is that I'm doing here in more detail during this part, but I'm just sanding, man. So instead, how about a little story, huh? There is a somewhat famous tragic story in the Pacific Northwest of a town called Bay Ocean. Well, Bay Ocean was more of a resort town that aspired to be the Atlantic City of the West, so I guess Pacific City? Anyway, the tale goes that in the early 1900s, a father and son pair of developers designed and began building a city with paved streets, hotels, and loads of entertainment on Tillamook Bay. A few decades later, they had built a single jetty into the ocean to improve boat traffic. That jetty, however, turned out to spell disaster for not only the project, but for the entire city. You see, water is a powerful force that not only moves our trash and intelligence-impaired sea life, but it also moves sediment. And this jetty blocked a lot of water from moving freely and doing what it had done for millions of years before humans started messing with it. So the ocean decided to retaliate and began eroding incredible amounts of sand in places it wasn't doing before. It began encroaching into the lands where homes, bowling alleys, and their massive 1,000-seat theater were built. Throughout the 30s and 40s, one by one, they all began collapsing and falling into the Pacific. Soon, all 2,000 of the town's residents deserted Bay Ocean. Massive waves destroyed the helpless high-class surface of the peninsula, and by 1960, every single home was destroyed. The last building, which was a garage, well, that finally met its watery end in 1971. Now, what does this have anything to do with this drum in particular? Well, that's where this drum came from, a Goodwill in Oregon. And just by looking at the amount of oxidation and rust, and knowing this is not an old drum by any means, Ludwig has only been producing Questlove pocket kits since 2016, it's probably safe to say this little guy was at least relatively close to the salty air of the Oregon coast. And just by getting to know this drum and seeing that it hardly, if ever, was played, with the head not having any stick marks and almost no chipping of the powder-coated rims, I'd wager to guess that this snare was immediately removed from the rest of the kit. These Questlove pocket drums are designed to be played by kids 4 to 10, but the small drum sizes and the 16-inch kick also work well in small jazz ensembles or even as practice kits that are easy to travel with. These are not to be confused with the Breakbeat series, which is about $100 more, and that's more tailored to the club drummer. But the pocket kit could work just as well on a tight budget, and let's be fair, us drummers are tightwads. So the backstory probably goes one of two ways with this drum. Someone bought a kit for their kid, but it was never played for whatever reason, and it was stored away somewhere, or the pocket kit was bought by a working jazz drummer who opted to use their preferred snare instead of the 12-inch toy-like hardwood one that the kit came with. Because it doesn't have the typical evidence of the destructive force of a young child, I guess the latter, but let me know what you think the history might be. Well, now we're pretty much all done with the sanding. You can see how much material I had removed around all of the holes to get rid of the indents from those washers and the rust and other imperfections. Not only does it look a lot better, the shell is getting back to being healthy again. To wax poetic, we've begun to rip this snare from the jaws of Neptune himself. So back inside, I cleaned off all the sawdust from the shell with a soapy wet paper towel and dried it off. I wasn't a fan of the wrap at first, but it's kinda grown on me. Red is my favorite color after all. And the wrap, it's not perfect, but I'm not gonna rewrap it or anything.
I like balls.
Time to put everything back together, and in my opinion, cotton balls is a cheap, fantastic way to tighten up the drum and get rid of any potential nastiness. So you just pack it in like so. In this case, half a ball for all your lugs, and it just helps make the drum feel and sound more unified. Or I could be completely crazy and it's just a placebo effect, but it's my Kool-Aid to drink, damn it. Might as well give a quick cleaning to the lugs all around. It kind of restores their sheen, even on less glossy finishes. This snare strainer, though, it's going to get the t-shirt treatment, because it doesn't deserve any better. It's time to unload my hardware haul and make some little assemblies. And we'll do it like so for the lug screws, with a metal washer on first and a rubber washer that will go against the shell. More metal to wood isolation, more gooder. The rubber washers were the most expensive at 55 cents each for the small ones and 65 cents for the larger ones. These squish nicely in and around the holes, creating even but firm pressure without coming loose. I couldn't find the large fender washers like the original screws, but I wasn't a big fan of them to begin with, and I wasn't trying to match the original. I'm kind of surprised that Ludwig would even kind of skimp out on these screws. The butt plate also got some washers. Never forget to washer your butt plate. To me, reassembly is the most satisfying part. There's a real zen to maintaining drums, putting order to that chaos. And sometimes there is something unexpected. So taking a moment to start with what you know, boil something down to smaller goals, and solve an issue you've never encountered before, well, that cultivates your confidence into embracing the sudden shakeups you'll certainly have elsewhere in your life. Or, I don't know, I'm just building drums, man. Aha! Found it! I hate these snare throw-offs. They're always a bit awkward to replace. Thankfully, my tiny adjustable wrench is small enough. I mean, it's average-sized. Alright, the throw-off and butt plate are reattached. It's looking pretty good. And the butt plate has indeed been washered. Now we just gotta do all them lugs. Well, that looks so much better than what we started with. Not only does it look great, but there's a significant upgrade to the uniformity of the shell and the hardware. I almost decided to reuse the original Ludwig head, but I bought an Evans head for this project that we'll see here in a bit, and I felt the drum sorta earned it. Got all the tension rods together, and I figured I'd throw on some of the Danmar nylon washer inserts that I had. I had extra of these lying around, and I love these things, and they're a great way to remove that metal-to-metal contact at the hoop, and they're super cheap too. Just before I threw on the resonant head, I figured I'd give the hoops another visual pass. I noticed some super tiny chips in the powder coating that I just touched up with a Milwaukee marker. It doesn't match perfectly, and the camera makes it look like it's hardly doing anything, but to the naked eye, it does a passable job, so it wouldn't draw your attention to it if you weren't looking for it. Bottom end of the snare got put back together, nothing fancy here. If you've seen the business end of a snare once, you've seen it a million times. With snare beds, tuning up the snare resonant head is kind of an Achilles heel for me. I know the lugs nearest to the snare beds should be just a little looser than the other lugs to increase the wire sensitivity, but I'm also aiming to get an all-around pitch somewhere between like 395 and 400 hertz, and that's where a TuneBot really helps here for me. I don't rely on the TuneBot that much, except to help get the lugs even with each other. After that, once it gets close to the pitch I want, I just trust my ears. I've tried getting things absolutely cinched up with a TuneBot, but I've had mixed results with the final tuning, so just trust your ear holes. Robots, they don't know everything. They can't feel or love or enjoy the taste of chocolate. They've got no sympathy for anyone. They're just unfeeling programs and a collection of wires and circuits that do one job and sometimes do it a little better than a human. I'm so sorry, TuneBot. I'm so sorry. Please work, please work, please work, please work. We good. Some simple adjustments here to the throw-off tension. I'm just making sure that it's not too tight or too loose when opening or closing the snares. Simple stuff. And here's that Evans G2 that I mentioned earlier. I prefer Evans because I've had consistent results and heads seated with less of a break-in period than other... There we go. Than other brands, which means less adjustment later on. Everyone has a preference, though. Mine is just Evans. Well, now that the Pocket Kit snare drum project is pretty much all said and done, I'm tuning up the batter head, and let's talk about what I invested into this drum. First, the drum itself was $30, hardware another $30, Evans G2 coated head another $25, also a little over 4 hours of reworking for whatever that counts for. Altogether, not counting gas to and from the hardware store and stuff, I've got like $85 into a budget level Ludwig snare. So if I were to turn around and try to sell this, would I make any reasonable amount of money on it? Probably not, but more importantly, does it sound good? Well, I'll let you be the judge of that. But first, we'll hear my daily driver, 14-inch PDP concept maple snare as a reference. Then we'll hear the 12-inch, both thrown on a kit. So let's take a listen.
It's actually got some pop to it.